The words don't cause the room to blow up. It gets frozen. No music, no laughter, no major build-up. Just an utterance that strikes the floor with such force that the surrounding air seems to vanish entirely. I do have HIV. Supporters characterize it as such, not as a thoughtful admission or a declaration meant to attract media attention, but rather as something that spontaneously burst when feelings were already too intense to manage. It only takes a few minutes for dot clips to get viral. It stops the channels of reaction. Too many comment sections are present. What they just heard is unknown to them. All they know is that, given that a new wave appears nearly instantly, something has changed and seems to be irreparable. Rather of calmly checking anything, people start saying that this was not a medical admission at all and that Tamar Braxton was just reacting. Responding to blogs, addressing rumors for days, and responding to her name, body, past, and suffering. Crewy was pulled over social media feeds. The supporters began asking the same question repeatedly. Was it her intention? Or did she simply lose her temper? They'd pushed Tamar into a corner. Online reports state that whenever she looked, they were already discussing and deciding. He was the first to mention the supposed connection between Tamar and Mendeecees, so I'm already labeling her. Points. Those conversations revolved around Funky DeNova. The story then becomes more sinister. The intensity of the emotional response abruptly increases, not because it is accurate, but rather because she is fed up with defending herself. Tamar reportedly leans into the charges rather than just responding to them. She says what everybody has already accused her of. The next charge is the one that everyone on the internet is surprised by. Because he has ruined her life, she believes Mendeecees deserves all of the penalties he is currently facing, including silence, legal issues, and the potential for an arrest. They did not have reciprocal TIs. They utilized force and crossed boundaries. There's one thing that everyone knows. It's more than just rumors now. Fans don't know what to consider first, though. It's like seeing a dam collapse when the blame moves so fast. The HIV assertion, or the underlying hatred. Some who support it call it a breakdown. It's harmful, according to critics. Proceed with caution. The consequences haven't even started yet. It takes time for the reaction to occur. Like shock radiating forth from a single sentence that was never intended to, it spreads in layers. The everlasting. What fans start to piece together instead of a confession is a moment, an illustration of how public pressure, rage, shame, and fatigue can all come together. There were rumors that the days before that occurrence were already very busy. Even though she didn't initiate the conversation, Tamar has ended up at the heart of it. There were persistent rumors about her health, conjectures about her personal life, presumptions that were passed off as truth, and the constant cacophony. No matter how often she remained silent, its numbers increased. The alteration was initially noticed by friends. There was no response to the texts. There were fewer phone conversations. It was a strained, thinner, slightly brittle voice, as opposed to the humor that people were accustomed to. Nevertheless, according to several close to her, no specific headline served as the decisive factor. The accumulation of blog postings that used comments that repeatedly used her name as a diagnosis and the same wording was the cause. People were arguing about her body as if it were public land. A door that was impossible to close had been opened, and the idea that there was a source for this story hung over everything. Funky is referenced a lot on the internet. His earlier remarks regarding Tamar and Mendeecees established a framework that others could develop. Neither because he professed to be a physician. Advocates claim that everything else happened after the suggestion of an affair was made. Rumors about health, moral judgments, and character assessments. All of a sudden, people were discussing more than just Tamar. Someone was dissecting her. It was not a plot, according to her defenders. Overload was the problem. It is claimed that Tamar answered, "Yes, I have HIV." It was a surrender, they said, rather than an admission. When she eventually gave up battling the labels that were placed on her, she fiercely repeated them back, practically inviting the internet to hear how it sounded vicious. Different people may interpret it differently. Those kinds of words are hardly isolated. According to critics, expressing them even on an emotional level will unavoidably have detrimental consequences. Despite this, critics concur that the environment is crucial. It was the pressure that was important. As the narrative developed in the media, it was important to consider how uncontrolled rumors were permitted to spread. The same emotional storm gave rise to a second, even more dramatic accusation. Tamar appears to change. She switched from defending herself to attacking Mendeecees. She claims he destroyed her life and that their relationship was more sinister than a poor choice or an unpleasant circumstance, which she claims she didn't pick. All of the things that made her feel enraged, violated, and helpless. Supporters claim that this explains her strong response. They contend that suffering and humiliation in front of others undermine authority. Mental filtering comes to an end. Pain is a language. Initially, Tamar is thought to be the link in that pain that had been accumulating for months. The hush, the rumors, the talk of arrests involving Mendeecees. She presents it as an outcome instead of a coincidence. She says Mans has legitimate concerns about possible legal issues, according to reports. According to internet rumors, Justice should be imprisoned since he is finally catching up. Proponents claim that no scheduled comments were made. According to someone who believed that nothing more needed to be protected because her name had already endured every conceivable form of agony, they weren't cooked. And the story breaks down again. Right now, a number of immediately viewers support her. It is their opinion that emotional outbursts are not impulsive. They claim that unless they were in excruciating pain, no one would invite such examination. They contend that this was not deception, but rather a woman's answer, highlighting her past frailty and mental health problems. Some shudder. They caution that making such grave claims in the absence of proof is impossible. Sensationality is said to be no justification for acts that potentially jeopardize life. The truth might become collateral damage in the chaos they fear. Other people are caught in the middle as well. Those who can't ignore the pattern yet aren't sure what to believe. Besides language, there are other things that stand out, Tamar said. The speed at which its meaning was formed online is what matters. In a few hours, headlines will solidify. Absent reaction videos that lack hesitancy remove context. Following refinement and condensing, phrases are republished. An expression of sentiment turns into a declaration. It's claimed. It is believed that the assertion is accurate. Unexpectedly, too, Tamar has ceased responding to rumors. It has been reported that her close friends attempt to intervene and prevent her from acting. They want you to be calm. They recommend taking a step back, taking a breath and ray. Nevertheless, the computer is already in operation. Verification is done by observing each silent moment. Each delay raises suspicion. Even de-escalation attempts are subject to damage management. Funky, in the meantime, changes back into a lightning rod. Regarding his role, fans differ. Some others believe he started the narrative. He never brought up his health or his wrongdoings, according to those who defend him. The fact that he spoke about what he saw rather than his diagnosis is what they emphasize. However, causes and consequences are not distinguished on the internet. It searches for targets and Funky talks first before staying in the queue off lanes. Tension permeates the entire body. Discussion boards become battlefields. Individuals debate responsibility, accountability, and consent while debating whether it would have been preferable to say nothing. Thinking about the safety of emotional expressiveness in a culture. The result is that indignation becomes beneficial. However, the lack of clarity, no formal declarations, affirmations, walkbacks, or reinforcement makes things more difficult. There are only individuals, feelings, and fragments, using their personal worries and presumptions to fill in the gaps. This, proponents say, is precisely why Tamar lost it. The narrative would continue without her, regardless of what she did. This is why restraint is so important, according to critics. While the cacophony persists, you have no control over the way words are employed after they leave your lips. Every viewer understands one thing. Whether or not the rumors are genuine in this instance is irrelevant. It concerns the consequences of someone acting without protection because they think that rumors are pursuing them. The simplicity with which sorrow can be transformed into a story, and the ease with which the main character of that story may be avoided, are addressed. Nothing seems to be resolved. When this period is over, there are only opinions. They lack facts, answers, and solutions. However, the eerie question that hovers over everything seems to be inevitable. The silent, eerie question that hangs over it all. What takes place when our feelings exposed to the public? After the internet determines that the tale doesn't require verification, the accusations continue. The first spike is followed by a continued focus. The pain gets worse. The next step is amplification rather than resolution. We have slowed each footage down. They say everything again. Fans begin to interpret tone as proof, emotion as intent, and pauses as confessions. Participants also get quieter when the argument gets louder. Tamar took a moment before expressing her meaning. There is no follow-up video that corrects the story.as per the rumors that are going around on social media. And the loudest part of the story is the lack of a well-chosen phrase that distinguishes between truth and emotion on discussion forums. It's seen by supporters as exhaustion. Some critics see it as evasion. Stillness, however, starts to do its own entity. She was overwhelmed by how quickly the situation slipped out of her grasp, according to online sources. Her irate remarks were suddenly frozen, quoted, and transformed into something enduring, according to those close to her. She was not going to confirm a diagnosis, they stated. The internet, however, had already made up its mind by the time that distinction became important. The phrase was shortened: eliminate the background. It reduced the emotion to a header. At this point, the conversation's emphasis switches from what was said to why. Numerous people have characterized the occurrence as an emotional collapse brought on by deliberate targeting. They see that Tamar's name and words that she never used to use have been self-descriptions in public have become popular. Moral judgments, insinuations, and health-related rumors were presented as issues. When someone is constantly given their identity, advocates say, they eventually break and re-enter it to put a stop to the disruption. Others have substantial disagreements with that interpretation. They contend that prominent personalities are aware of the consequences of their statements, that emotional responses increase the traction of rumors, and are also accountable. These discussions are not just theoretical anymore. They are near. People accuse one another of exaggerating injuries or downplaying trauma. The tempo shifts from understanding to providing help. Amidst all of this, the accusations made against Mendeecees gain momentum. Tamar's fury, according to sources, was not just part of a tumultuous situation, but it also went beyond her need for it to spill over. She supposedly made him the cause of her pain. Phrases like "ruin my life" start to circulate. The discussion then moves on to the most serious accusation of all, but it is made out of anger rather than as a formal accusation. Instead of being stated as truth, it is indicated by emotion. At this point, fear enters the discussion. People's reputations can still be damaged by angry remarks, and fans start to wonder if emotional outbursts are still important from a legal perspective. If inference alone causes lasting injury, then the intent vs. impact debate is up for debate. Suffering is not predetermined, which is how accusation differs from trauma discussion. According to her fans, if Tamar had behaved the way she did, there was a serious issue. They contend that asking someone who is in agony to keep quiet is both difficult and unreasonable. Survivors don't always communicate in a comprehensible, logical, or intelligent manner. Some claim the opposite. They caution that any implicit assertions of force should be made clear. Evidence cannot be substituted with motive, framing. They argue that once statements of this nature are made public, they cannot be withdrawn with subsequent justifications, as they fear that someone else's life will be destroyed to save their suffering if the proper legal procedures are not followed. The internet doesn't wait for responses, of course. Does the discussion around Mendeecees have a fresh feeling of urgency? Not because of fresh facts, but because of the emotional appeal that feeds into long-standing rumors. These interpretations are gaining popularity. People start piecing together prior news reports, historical events, outdated court cases, and incidents that are not linked. Together, they form an expanding idea that seems logical even without evidence. That's how conjecture solidifies. The arrest, according to several users, illustrates a point. Some point out that the details are inconsistent. Although there are no trustworthy sources tying the TIs the internet is pointing to, there are no costs connected to the assertions made. The power of narrative over reasoning, and now the narrative benefits from silence, fury, and accusations. Like an unanswered question, Funky's name still looms above everything. Whether he should be held accountable for the incidents that occurred is being debated in the comments sections, where supporters claim that rather than drawing, he spoke about what he saw. Final thoughts. He shouldn't be held responsible for other people's extrapolations, they contend. Critics argue that he only needed to bring up proximity dynamics once in order to ignite the fire. The internet would surely become unmanageable and unsettling. According to some of the circulating discussion, Funky himself does not come back right away. The constraint can be interpreted differently, and he doesn't go into great detail to defend or explain it. For some, it is an indication of maturity. It's guilt for some people. Again, quiet might mean anything. What the crowd wants. Regarding damage control behind the scenes, fans assume about the lawyer's advice to remain silent about networks closely monitoring the situation. Off-camera discussions, meetings, and persons deciding not to make an. Already there are rumors of uncontrollable situations. The notion that something is manipulating someone behind closed doors gains popularity quickly, despite the fact that none of this has been confirmed. Everything is altered by how viewers interpret this idea. What appears to be chaos to some people is intentional. They get started. Some vehemently disagree with such interpretation, claiming that this was not the intention, that emotional breakdown is not deliberate, and that the purpose of omitting remarks is to avoid escalation rather than to examine each word in light of danger. That is not self-organizing. That what viewers are witnessing is merely the result of a clash between the public, mass, and individual suffering. As time goes on, you want the story to remain relevant and change because fresh videos don't include new information. They offer fresh perspectives on perspectives, answers to responses, and points of view. More significant than the first moment is what people were thinking about it at the time. For some, Tamar becomes a warning, to others, a symbol. There is still uncertainty in every because of this. However, there is no clear legal record, no indication of medical proof. And as Funky becomes a point of reference that no one can agree upon, and Mendeecees becomes a question mark surrounded by conjecture, the discrepancies cannot be reconciled by a single conclusive statement. It is increasingly believed instead that this issue has gotten so bad that it is hard to fix. The story they will have to contend with has already been constructed via repetition. Even if explanations are later on, supporters start to perceive this as the quiet danger when the reality is neglected. The internet gets persuaded without evidence whenever something is presented in such an expressive way. By the end of this phase, the story is no longer about what tomorrow promised or what actually took place. Consequences are the primary focus. Instead, a belief is reinforced by suffering, whether genuine or imagined, and once established, it is hard to change. Illustrates how a moment may quickly go out of control, how individuals forget their goals when they express their feelings in public, and that disagreement isn't even the most awkward aspect. It seems that nobody is certain that this can be reversed. Rather, something more intricate starts. As the discussion intensifies, it focuses less on whether Tamar was incorrect or if the internet overreacted, and more on how moral judgments are made fast using emotional narratives and how they begin to redefine roles before anyone can react. According to many who have followed Tamar for years, her response wasn't unexpected. She used her prior candor regarding suffering, treachery, and vulnerability to support her claim that the incessant need to defend, justify, and clarify oneself after living in the spotlight for a significant portion of one's life becomes intolerable. Her outburst, according to advocates, was motivated more by fatigue than by the truth. Tiredness from being discussed instead of directly addressed. Others have a totally different perspective on the same situation, contending that implication is not justified by careless emotional transparency. Even inadvertently, using words that have the potential to be criminally suggestive should be done with take care. Another surge of content is fueled by this conflict of interpretations. Videos that examine how people behave. There was no trial before the clips were slowed down. The internet takes on the role of a jury, tone-breaking strands that draw meaning from breath and uncertainty. In each retelling, the accused, it is revealed that Mendeecees' charges are becoming increasingly false. A few display what began as an emotional breakdown as an aggressive charge, but others display it as a representative proclamation of betrayal, offered as a symbolic accusation of betrayal.